Hey everybody, so today we're going to be discussing Chapter 43, discussing how do we gain access and to a patient who is involved in a motor vehicle accident as well as extrication. In this chapter we'll discuss how we plan for this, how do we size up the scene, gain access, extricate, as well as some specialized equipment that we may use to help stabilize or disentangle patients. Motor vehicle accidents are one of the most common things that we will go to that requires some type of rescue. When we arrive on scene of a motor vehicle accident, we start obviously with a scene size up, determining damage to a vehicle. Is there any entrapment to it? Is there any extra resources that we need at this time? As well as we start looking at how are we going to stabilize the car? How are we going to gain access versus simple versus complicated? How are we going to extricate, get them out and package them and prepare to move the patient? Now, generally, this will be done by the fire department. However, if you are operating with a fire department, um, obviously our primary concern, no matter who you are, whether fire or EMS, is proper patient care. Even while we're getting them out, we still have to take care of that patient. So for the planning ahead part, it starts off with the dispatch. What are we going to? And we get this based off of the dispatch information. So you're dispatched to 123 Sunset Boulevard, reference MVC with rollover. Um, that's all we get. So when we get in the truck and we call en route, we may say, can you advise entrapment, possible injuries? And if dispatch is aware of that information, they will let us know. And if they say yes, that positive entrapment, we know when we arrive on scene that we're going to need to get our extrication gear out. We also want to see that we're familiar with um, the location that we're going to. If it's somewhere where are there any difficulties with it, such as being a small roadway or on a major roadway or in a area where there's a lot of houses or buildings at? Um, as you approach the scene, even while you're 2 blocks away, you're already looking at the scene, trying to survey it for any hazards, anyone that may have been ejected, as well as identifying your mechanism of injury. And throughout the entire time that you're on scene, remember, it's a continuous process that you're doing that scene size up. You're taking in all of that information, and at any time it can change. It can go from a simple, we're able to open the door, we're simply doing a nice easy extrication of the patient, and then all of a sudden the car catches on fire. Well, now we're needing to step it up a little bit, and we need to get that patient out of the car quicker. Based on the initial information provided by the caller, the communications officer may have also dispatched additional resources to the scene for you, such as police for traffic control, as well as investigators to investigate the crash, or the fire department or rescue services for extrication if needed. If it's a hazardous scene, they may have already called for a hazmat team. If there's a power lines or gas lines or anything along those lines, they may call for a utility company. Based off the dispatch information, if protocols state, they may all go ahead and launch air medical transport, go ahead and get them en route to you in the event that you need them. You can always cancel them, but they're on the way. And then if you're in a body of water, they may go ahead and dispatch for a water rescue team as well. When working on the scene of a call, you want to make sure that you have your protective equipment. If you're going anywhere where there might be glass or sharp metal, you want to make sure that you have turnout gear on. If you're actively involved in extrication, you want to make sure that you have full turnout gear, including a coat, your vest, your reflective vest, your bunker pants, as well as steel-toed boots. This way that you are properly protected while you're going through and extricating that patient. When working around electrical lines, you always want to assume that any down power lines are still live. Even if you don't see them actively arcing, it may still be live, and as soon as you step out of your truck, you could possibly get zapped. Any vehicles that might be in contact with the power line, don't touch it. Don't even come near it. And fortunately, we have a wonderful PA system in our ambulance, so we can even advise the patients to remain in their vehicle without even having to get out of our truck. If you come up on a scene like this, if the power company has not already been dispatched, you need a radio dispatch. Make them aware of it, so that way they can get the power company out there to power down those lines. When dealing with traffic, it's best to have PD out there so that way they're more properly trained to reroute this type of traffic. Um, it's best to have it rerouted onto different roadways instead of traveling alongside of ours. However, if you are not able to, it's recommended that at least 50 feet from the scene is where the traffic begins being channeled around. In this diagram, it discusses about how flares and cones should be far enough placed from a scene so that a car can safely stop before it hits the scene, even if the driver did not notice the flares or cones from a distance. So if the posted speed limit is 20 miles per hour, the general stopping distance for that speed is 50, plus the speed limit. The distance for the furthest warning device should be 70 feet. And it goes so on and from there. Use any fire apparatus or emergency response vehicles as well as blockers to help provide your safety zone. Remember, we park our ambulance 50 to 100 feet from the scene of an accident. If your regular flow of traffic must be channeled around the scene, it should be routed at least 50 feet from the wrecked cars. If your apparatus, or if you're in a curved section of the road, the start of the curve should be considered the edge of your danger zone. If your scene is over the crest of a hill, you should position your flares on the other side of the crest, so that way vehicles will go ahead and start moving over before they reach that top of the hill as well. Another consideration in vehicle positioning is substances leaking from a vehicle involved in a crash. Park your ambulance upwind to avoid being affected or overcome by potentially hazardous fumes. Also, park your ambulance uphill if a potentially hazardous liquid is leaking from a vehicle, so that way the liquid will flow away from the ambulance. Make sure that you're always facing your oncoming traffic, and position your vehicle in a way so that your loading doors are angled away from traffic, so that you're not getting in and out into the actual flow. With alternative fuel vehicles, many of these electrical systems in newer model vehicles can remain an electrical charge and remain active even when the battery is disconnected. So you always want to make sure that everything is disconnected. If there's a secondary system, make sure it's disconnected as well. And it's not just simply turning the keys off. We may even have to go in and disconnect the terminals from the battery. With airbags, the activation is usually done by simply disconnecting the car's battery cables. Until this is done, do not lean in front of those airbags, because if they do go off, the force could cause severe injury not only to you, but for the patient. And sometimes it can be just a simple bump on the energy absorbing bumpers to cause the airbags to go off. In addition, these cylinders that control these bumpers, when exposed to the heat created from fire conditions, can actually burst, not only causing the airbags to go off, but becoming projectiles and throwing debris from the involved vehicle. That's why emergency responders that have been injured as these cylinders exploded and struck those that were standing around the vehicle. Make sure that you are able to locate all potential patients. Ask bystanders if any patients may have walked away from the scene or if a passerby took a patient away. Before leaving the scene, a thorough search of the area for all victims should be conducted by all emergency personnel. Always look inside all compartments of a vehicle and even under the seats. Children and even adults have been found thrown under a seat by the force of a crash. Victims of homicide or kidnapping have been found inside trunks of burned vehicles that were not checked before emergency responders departed the scene after car fires were extinguished. If it is necessary to disconnect the car battery, the engine compartment must be accessed. Cut or use a wrench to remove the negative battery cable first. The negative cable is generally black in color. If you decide to cut the cable, make two cuts. The first cut approximately 4 inches from the terminal, and the second cut approximately 2 inches from the first. This creates a large enough gap in the cable that the cut ends cannot accidentally touch and re-energize the electrical system. Remove the positive cable last. If the positive cable is removed first, a spark could potentially occur that would ignite acid fumes from the battery or gasoline spilled from the accident. Make sure also that you have a fire extinguisher available in the event that the car does catch on fire. At least you can put a quick attempt at trying to put out the fire. Before accessing it, make sure that the vehicle is stabilized. This can be simply done just by shutting off the engine and setting the parking brake and using some type of cribbing to stabilize the vehicles. Most incidents do not present many access problems, so don't require a lot of access or resources. Excuse me. If you have to do a complex access, however, make sure that you request additional resources. For simple access, it's just simply opening up a door. Complex access, this is when we may have to be busting a door open or breaking glass, or if with a vehicle, breaking or cutting the car apart to get to the patient. With residential access, first thing you want to do is check all doors and windows to see if you can either A, get in contact with the patient, and see if there may be an open door, open window somewhere around the house. If you're able to contact the patient, see if maybe a neighbor has a key or they may have a key hidden somewhere in their yard. If you're unable to make contact with the patient, also check with neighbors to see if they may have a key or if they know if anybody's at home. If you are having to make forced entry, make sure you have police and fire on scene with you. If you're able to, if the patient's not critically injured, wait for police before making forced entry. That way they can get there and help you secure that scene, make sure that it's not a possible someone's waiting in there waiting to shoot you. If you're able to talk to the patient, let them know what you're going to do. Make sure you're wearing protective equipment. If you're breaking a window, this is usually easiest and less costly to repair, but make sure that you stand alongside the window so that way no glass doesn't blow back on you, and strike the upper corner with a flashlight or some other similar tool. Make sure that you clear any glass out before accessing the window, and try to select an unoccupied room so that way you don't A, scare the living tar out of the patient, and B, don't spew glass all over them as well. Try to get also a window that you can see what's on the other side, and try to find a window that doesn't appear to be too expensive, but that will still allow you to access. When dealing with a motor vehicle accident and having to gain access, your job as working on an ambulance is patient care. That's your primary function. It's the fire department's function to get that patient out. Always approach the vehicle from the front, so that way you can see what is going on. Also, you can get a better look of the patient as well. You can go ahead and start assessing them from that way as well. Start with simple access just by simply trying the doors and door locks. If the doors are all locked, try to have the patient, without moving their head, to unlock the doors or roll down their windows so that we can get in. For complex access, the quickest way to access this is by breaking the window. If you're having to break the window, make sure that you carefully remove any broken glass. starting at the top, continuing until all has been removed. Broken correctly, although completely shattered, most tempered glass will remain in place even if it was not taped. If you are having to do anything else, such as having to cut the window out, try to cover the patient with some type of blanket or tarp. If you're busting the window, use the window furthest from the patient and try to use either a hammer or some type of punch or spring-loaded punch. This is that spring-loaded punch that I was just talking about. Can be gotten from any hardware store. All you're doing is you'll put the punch right up to it, pull back on the spring, let it go while keeping the tip of the punch in place, and it will then shatter the window. And then all you got to do is carefully remove the broken glass. The role of an EMT during vehicle stabilization and patient extrication is that of patient care provider. Patient care always precedes removal from the vehicle unless delaying removal would endanger the life of the patient, EMS personnel, or other rescuers. Cooperate in every way possible with personnel who are working to disentangle the patient. After gaining safe access to your patient, provide the same care you would provide to any other trauma patient. Provide spine motion restriction, including a C-collar. Complete your primary assessment and provide any critical interventions needed. Be sure you have or have called for sufficient personnel to help you provide proper care and to help you protect the patient from any potential hazards. Communicate with the patient, keep them informed of your actions and the actions of your rescue team. This communication is necessary for the safety of both you and your patient and the crew. Before any forcible rescue is initiated, its effect on the patient must be analyzed. The usual approach to rescue is to remove the vehicle from around the patient. However, when the condition of the patient or the scene dictates speed, the parts of the vehicle that allow for rapid extrication while protecting the patient's cervical spine should be removed first. Use heavy blankets, tarp, or some type of salvage cover to protect yourself, the patient, and any other EMTs from the glass and flying debris that commonly result from disentanglement operations. Give your patient the opportunity to have some control over the process. For example, when the rescue crew asks you if you are ready for them to do a function, such as remove the door, check with the patient. Asking if they are ready to have the door or dash removed provides them with a feeling of control. If properly prepared, the patient will readily agree with each step of the extrication. Vehicle stabilization itself is carried out by specialized personnel using equipment such as cribbing and wedges, step chocks, airbags, hydraulic tools and rams, come-alongs, jacks, chains, and winches. Table 43-1 goes over these equipment, a description of it and its use. With an upright vehicle, we want to try to use step chocks or some type of cribbing to immobilize the suspension so that way we don't have to worry about it bouncing. Usually with chocks, they'll be pushed in until they completely touch the undercarriage. If step chocks are unavailable, a box crib with wedges can also function in much of the same manner. Either procedure can prevent the vehicle from rocking. The vehicle also should not be lifted to place these chocks. They'll just simply slide into place. Once you get them in, you can then remove air from your tires. A vehicle on its side is likely to roll also onto its roof, thereby aggravating a patient's existing injuries and posing a severe risk of injury to rescuers both in and around the vehicle. So if you're ever dealing with a vehicle on its side, do not enter it until after it has been stabilized with either use of cables or some type of cribbing to stabilize the vehicle. The first step in stabilizing this vehicle is, if pending the equipment is available, is to attach a stabilizing pole. Pulling device, cable, or some type of chain from the undercarriage of the car to another vehicle or strong immovable object. Rescuers would then crib the length of the vehicle's side where it has contact with the ground. Every void between the ground and the vehicle should be filled with box cribbing and wedges to minimize movement. The 12 to 18-inch space between the top of the door frame, along the roof line, and the cable should also be filled. With the vehicle on its roof, you do not want to open a door because this will decrease the support provided by the roof posts, which are already not designed to support the full vehicle's weight. With this, you want to use cribbing and airbags to help stabilize the vehicles. When the airbag is inflated and one end of the vehicle begins to lift, the other one will settle onto your box cribbing, and the weight of the vehicle will be totally removed from the roof posts. When extricating a patient from a vehicle, the goal of extrication is to remove the car from around the patient. When we do this, we use specialized equipment such as spreaders and cutters by specially trained personnel. An EMT will enter the vehicle and establish and maintain cervical spine motion restriction as rescue personnel begins to stabilize the vehicle by placing chocks under the wheels. The person that is inside the car is also wearing full turnout gear so that way they are protected from any flying debris as well. Rescue personnel will begin to stabilize the vehicle by placing chocks under the wheels and deflating tires. Once they do that, they'll remove the batteries or disconnect the battery from the vehicle, as well as covering the patient with a fire retardant blanket. Most hazards, remember, can be avoided by simply turning off the ignition. By disconnecting the battery cables, this thoroughly minimizes all risks. This reduces the risk of post-crash fire or unexpected airbag deployment. Once you're ready, you'll use spreaders to pop the rear doors out. This gives you access to the B post, which is the post between the front and rear sections of the passenger compartment. The B post should be cut. A strap or rope should be attached to the rear door to prevent it from popping back at you. You'll then cut the B post at the bottom of the door. And using a hydraulic ram or spreaders, you'll rip the B post while pulling the doors open on the front hinges. Next, you're going to remove the roof. Your hydraulic cutters or a sawzall will cut both the A and C posts and the opposite side B posts, and a glass cutting saw will cut across the bottom of your windshield. Once you get everything properly cut, you want to use as many people as needed to safely lift the roof up and away from the vehicle. If needed, you'll then use spreaders to free the patient from the dashboard. By jacking the dash or performing a dash roll, this is important when a patient is trapped by the dashboard. A relief cut should be made where the rocker panel meets the bottom of the A post. Hydraulic spreaders can then be used to push the dash off the patient. Some spreaders can have a spreading force of more than 37,000 pounds and can spread up to 40 inches in length. The whole purpose of cutting the vehicle from around the patient is to protect the patient from further injury of both the cervical spine and lower spine. The proper way to remove an injured patient from a damaged vehicle is vertically or in line with the spine. Having a patient, especially when complaining of pain, spin or rotate their body onto a backboard is unacceptable. With side impact or head protection airbags, you want to take some special consideration when cutting the posts. These deployment systems may utilize high-pressure stored gas cylinders to deploy their airbags, which can cause serious injuries to rescue personnel or even the patient if they are punctured by cutting tools. A rescuer can force or pop a door open with manual pry tools, hydraulic spreaders, and air chisels. Remember to protect yourself and the patient from flying debris by covering yourself with a blanket during the procedure. If possible, place a solid object such as a spine board between the tool activity area and the patient. Although it is usually preferable to totally remove the roof from a damaged vehicle, occasionally it may be decided to just flap the roof or displace the roof and windshield of the vehicle to help facilitate patient removal. Because this procedure involves maneuvers close to the patient, you and the patient must be well protected from the tools and flying debris. To extricate a patient from a vehicle that is still on its side, first thing you want after stabilizing the vehicle, first thing you want to do is cut the upper post using a hydraulic cutter or cutting tool, and the windshield should also be cut during this process also. If you have to gain access to the patient, you can do this by removing the rear window. Once that is done, you'll remove the roof down to provide an adequate space for which to remove the patient, and this will then allow you to get in and extricate your patient appropriately. Alright guys, that completes this chapter. Make sure that you do your Brady Labs. If you have any questions, you can either send me an email in Remind or in Blackboard. Y'all have a good rest of your day, and I'll see y'all next time in class.